To start off, my research question was, what recruiting practices can environmental organizations integrate into their workforce development methodology to increase diversity? Jumping into a little background on where I got that question from, the environmental sector has been historically white male dominated with little progress in the past decade. Despite national growth in minority populations, the environmental sector hovers around 16% minority staff and board members. Less than 12% of minority employees in the environmental industry advance into leadership positions. And overall, these numbers are just not where they should be with the progress that we've been making, in the world over the past 10 or so years. The objective of this project is to identify reoccurring recruiting practices that can increase environmental workforce diversity. And to do that, I completed an internship with NOAA. My internship had two main parts. The first one being creating a list of recruiting practices to help establish NOAA's pilot recruiting strategy. And the second one being establishing a college database for access to program information that will help NOAA build a diverse hiring pipeline. The methods that I used for the first portion of my internship were to just interview 4 recruiting professionals from very different backgrounds. And I was able to draw conclusions and overlapping themes to create this best practices list. The second portion of my internship was the database. And to give you a little bit of a better idea, I'm just going to go ahead and blow this up really quick. So the database that I created consisted of all of the undergraduate, graduate, and community colleges in California. Overall, I looked at about 300 colleges. And from there, I was able to just create a prioritizing database for NOAA when they're looking to recruit directly from college. Looking at this graph here, this just shows on the very far right the total amount of schools that I looked at. And then as we go to the left, we can see how many schools had no supplemental minority support. Continuing to the left, we can see which ones had were a recognized minority serving institution and had the program MESA, which was a additional program. It's a STEM program for underrepresented groups. And then to the left again, we can see how many schools had just MESA. And then at the very far left, we can see how many were both recognized or were just recognized minority serving institutions. And just minority serving institutions was the highest amount out of all of the schools that I looked at. So overall, this database just creates an easier way for NOAA to prioritize underrepresented groups during hiring from colleges. And it really just helps to narrow down their search. So if they're looking for someone from a specific major who comes from one of these schools that has this supplemental support, this is where they can have an easier time finding out which school or which program to look at, depending on what they're looking for, whether it's MESA or recognized minority serving. And then jumping into the results of my project led me to find specific tactics that lead to higher candidate response rate, interest, and retention. I'm going to go ahead and blow up this graphic as well so we can just see it a little bit better. But here are the 4 main themes that I found when interviewing these 4 professional recruiters. The first one being an inclusive experience. The recruiters really just stress how important it is to create an inclusive interviewing experience and align the company values with that of the candidate. Candidates really want to see that these companies understand what they're looking for and go out of their way to kind of align these values. So it's just really important that when doing the interviewing and recruiting process that an inclusive environment is created. One of the recruiters that I talked to said that he believes that 2 of the main reasons that candidates may lose interest or decline an offer are if they tried to initiate a conversation surrounding a topic on identity or diversity that they did not enjoy the response of from the company, or if the company that they are interviewing with does not have diversity or representation. So this may be a deterrent for many candidates and de-influence them from continuing on with the interviewing process. So this inclusive experience is just very important. Next, we can look at new initiatives. This was one of the more interesting conversations that I had, and it was really just on establishing a mentorship system that can be used during recruiting or once hired. So the recruiter that I spoke to gave the example of creating a mentorship system that pairs together people with similar backgrounds. This just creates more of a sense of community and identity, and helps to align people with other individuals in the company that have just like a similar background. So this was a really good example that I thought was a great initiative that can be used either once within the company, so like having this mentorship for people that are already hired, or even within the interviewing process. So theoretically, candidates could be matched up with someone to shadow with that has a similar background, just so they can really have that extra connection. Next, I went into the detail with personalization that recruiters really just emphasize is super important while recruiting. So one of the main things that's important is just making sure that these messages are personal, and that candidates don't feel like they're being contacted by a robot. We want to create recruiting personalities, and this will just increase the response rate and the amount of candidates that really want to continue that conversation. And finally, we can look at virtual outreach. All 4 of the interviewers, or the recruiters that I interviewed, mentioned LinkedIn was the most successful place to source and continue conversations with candidates. So it's really just important that LinkedIn is utilized to its fullest. And to do so, we need to use filters. So filters are really important. They can be used to narrow down. The examples that were given by one of the recruiters is historically female names if they're trying to increase female representation, or historically, or names that are historically associated with specific cultures if they're trying to increase representation there. It just makes it a little bit easier for the company to narrow down who they're looking for instead of having to sift through thousands of people on LinkedIn. So this is like a real life example that was given to me by one of the recruiters that her company does, and this is a very large company and it's been successful for them. Finally, just a little bit more on my results page. I did some supplemental research, and I was able to find that there are 3 additional factors that influence candidate interest. These were found through research papers that I went through. The first one being that the organization's outward desire to increase diversity is a very huge factor in if the candidate wants to continue with the interview process. Next comes the display of diversity within leadership, and finally, tailoring the interview experience to each candidate. These were all things that were talked about within my interviews as well, so there was a lot of crossover there. And additionally, a final tactic that kind of relates to my database that I collected was just prioritizing recruiting from minority supporting colleges diversifies the entry-level talent pool. This is super important because these are people that are starting like at the entry-level positions and will keep moving up, and we need this talent pool to be diversified. And so if we are able to prioritize minority representing schools or schools that have these supplemental programs, it really just increases that the diversity within that entry-level talent pool. And finally, we can look at implications. The results of my project can be used to adjust recruiting strategies in environmental organizations. This is not limited to just NOAA, and I do think that these results are transferable into any environmental organization. Additionally, structured recruiting plans prioritize underrepresented groups and help to increase workplace diversity overall. Through diverse recruiting, diversity in the environmental sector will finally be on the rise, and it will increase overall representation and allow for more diverse leadership.